Hi and welcome. This is Practical Buddhist Coaching, and I'm Karl, and in each session I explore the Buddhist path using a clear and consistent model, one that helps us make sense of why we may suffer and how to stop feeding that suffering. And when I talk about suffering, I mean any mental sensation that feels like unease. So, the model itself is very simple. Our experiences are filtered, as you can see in the model, through either the unconditioned or the conditioned mind. But for most of us, most of the time, it's the conditioned mind, which is full of habits and beliefs. The more we recognize when these habits and patterns are happening, and the more we can not get involved in the conditioned mind and follow the conditioned mind, then the less narratives and the less we filter our experiences through a sense of liking or disliking or a story. So we just experience rather than experience and have a resulting reaction. So everything that I teach, mindfulness, calm, ethics, and insight, always comes back to that basic understanding. Now today I want to explore something subtle but powerful, and it's also on the diagram, and it is unnecessary passion. When I use the word passion, that might definitely at first sound like a good thing. And indeed sometimes passion can be motivating. But the kind of passion that I'm talking about here is different. It's that restless drive inside, the feeling that something needs to happen, to change, to improve. It's a very restless, subtle drive that pushes us from being relaxed into some sort of action and some sort of state of unease. It's that voice in the back of your head that says things like, "You're not good enough, you should be doing more. You haven't done enough yet." Or you'll be safe, you'll be loved, and you'll be worthy once you achieve this or get to that point. Quite often this voice becomes so familiar that we don't even question it. But it's not actually wisdom as such, it's just conditioning. It's old programming from our culture, our country, society, school, university, family. It could even be something that comes about because the fact that we inhabit these bodies and these minds that are designed to chase survival, that are designed to chase food and safety and control, and so then that becomes part of the conditioning as well. But either way, somewhere along the line, we pick up this idea that we need to be more, and then we spend our lives trying to chase and prove that. But if we are able, through reflection, through meditation, through a process of shamatha, which is calming ourselves, and then looking in a state of very equanimous, balanced mental state of calm, when we stop and look, we start to realize that most of this content that we're chasing was never really ours. And that realization can be incredibly freeing. And that's why in my coaching model I place unnecessary passion right up front. In stage 1, fundamental wisdom, which is primarily discussing and explaining this model. And that's where we map how exactly suffering and unease comes about and how it works. And we start to recognize that this isn't just about stress or distraction or unease. It's about understanding how our mind constantly fuels craving and conflict if we habitually sit in this conditioned mind. And so when we're following or we're automatically applying the conditioned mind with all of its stored beliefs, opinions, preferences, then we find ourselves chasing images, status, productivity, perfection. Not because life requires us to, but instead because our conditioned concepts, our conditioned core beliefs and opinions and preferences insist upon it. And once we see that, something opens. And we realize that just because we have these stored expectations, we still have a choice, and we can still discern that those aren't our choices, and that we don't actually have to follow those thoughts. We don't have to follow those reactions. And especially once we've done some shamatha, and we've calmed things and slowed things down, then it becomes a lot easier to discern what is automatic reaction. And then that opens up a whole bunch of space and freedom for us to make our own choice. And so once that happens, we realize that we don't have to keep doing this. We don't have to obey every pressure. We don't have to follow every should. We don't have to act on every inherited belief. And that's the beginning of wisdom, seeing clearly and giving ourselves permission to stop. And in the model, you'll see there also that there's ethics and renunciation. And renunciation from a beginner's perspective can be misunderstood. It's not harsh self-denial. It means discerning what's necessary. And then, so things like shelter, social support, food, water, time outside, time in nature. Understanding what is necessary and then what is unnecessary passion. And then seeing that you can let go all the unnecessary stuff. And we also learn in the ethics section that unnecessary passion is a bit like putting debts on a credit card that you eventually have to pay back. The more that you chase, the more debts you have, the more you owe. And all that stress and all that time and energy in trying to chase all of that passion only runs up a debt. And no chasing for status or for money or for material items or control, none of that really brings much lasting peace. And whilst they might have some utility, especially when you're trying to meet your basic needs, at some point it just becomes just running up debt. And why do I say that? Because in the end, all of that, anything that you could possibly gain, it might be the control of a political control of a country, or it could be you own 10 houses, or you own $1 billion worth of gold. At the end of the day, something will happen. Something will change where you won't have those things anymore. And of course, we can't forget sickness, aging, and death. And so when you die, you can't take the 10 houses with you. You can't take the $1 billion, and you can't take the control. So any status, any control, any power that you have will fade. Success changes. Even our sense of self and our identity, in the end, when death comes, dissolves. And so here, in the renunciation section is where we begin to let go of all that chasing for the unnecessary stuff so that we're not running up the credit card. And when we reduce unnecessary stimulation, endless scrolling, shopping, proving, chasing promotions, having more qualifications and so forth, we can stop feeding habits that were actually potentially not about us. They might have been things that we learnt that we needed to seek approval or we needed to avoid situations. And then we can begin to discern when we stop the noise of the conditioned mind, we can think about what are the things that are important to us authentically. And that might be time in nature, that might be time with other people. There may be aspects of life that resonate to you more, such as art, creativity, gardening, perhaps building and doing certain things you realize are more important to you than that qualification, than that control, than that status, than that job. And so that's discovering a more authentic you. And so this process is one of simplification, and slowly life can become a lot easier and a lot lighter. And we can start to see that living differently without the voice of the conditioned mind and unnecessary passion can be very freeing. We can move towards just being an always human doing, towards just being a human being. If we look at the diagram also, we can see shamatha. And shamatha is where we practice slowing everything down. We develop calm and steadiness. And we begin to notice how passion moves throughout the body, how it has this tendency to create tension, and how tension tends to build before action, and how craving tends to tighten the breath and tighten and activate the nervous system. And then we can also see how the mind subtly pushes us towards involving the sense of self and getting identified with the things of the world. The involvement of ego, and how we create roles where we care about the experiences that we have rather than having those experiences just happen. And that's something we cover a lot also in the samatha stage when we look at dependent origination. So if that's of interest to you, you can look at the course or move through the course to that stage. And in shamatha, we develop mindfulness that notices that every sensation that we have of body, senses, and mind is just an experience, and in that way can give rise to a sensation and a suggestion from the conditioned mind, but that we don't have to follow that, and that any resultant emotions don't necessarily have to control us. And the space between our impulse, our experience, and our reaction, that's where freedom begins. So it's finally in the fourth stage, samadhi, and a correction to before. That's where I discuss dependent origination, the model which looks at the loop of how triggering factors like the senses lead to maintaining factors, such as the ego, becoming involved, attached to things that are happening, and how that all has grown from the seed, which is the core belief, the preferences, all those pre-programmed things that the conditioned mind has, acts like a seed. And the senses trigger that seed, and then it's maintained by our sense of self, wanting to get involved and manage the situation. But in samadhi, we can look deeply how passion is constructed in just the way I said. We see how the senses trigger thoughts, how thought fuels identity, which wants to control our experiences, and then how our identity locks us into striving. But by this point of the journey, the mind is quieter because we've mastered shamatha back in stage 3. And the habits are weaker because we've been using renunciation in stage 2. And when we can have more stillness, and when we're not automatically acting on passion, we're more able to learn how to sit with passion. We recognize unnecessary passion, we sit with it, and we don't act on it. We simply see it arise and simply let it go. And there's an acronym that we learn in stage 4, readiness. R is for recognize, E is for endure, A is for accept, rather than acting on it. Accept as in being balanced. D is seeing the danger of following passion because it does get us into debt and it does make us go down the rabbit hole of wanting control and status, and we get distracted from who we really are. The I is investigation, which is exactly what I was just talking about looking at what are the core beliefs that drive it, what was the trigger, and how has your ego got attached into this whole predicament? How do you get it identified? And I'm really just summarizing here, and there's more information in stage 4. But once we are able to bring all of those stages together, we begin to understand the nature of the conditioned mind and passion. That they are not us, that they are just habits that we have had in the past. And we're able to no longer get involved and follow those habits. We see them as empty, as simply suggestions, and things we don't need to act on. So now in conclusion, what's the takeaway here? When we see that the conditioned mind is not us, it's a collection of things that we've picked up, we realize we don't have to push so hard. We don't have to meet life with constant tension about our goals, our preferences, and our opinions, and other people's rules or our internal rules. Instead, we can just meet life as it is, more directly and more calmly, with our whole self being present here and now. So, the next time you notice that restless drive, that unnecessary passion arising, if you can discern it, when you see that pull to chase or control or prove, you can just pause and you can ask, is this necessary? Does this benefit me? Or is this just passion again? A conditioned echo. And you might find that you can just stop, that you can soften, and that you can breathe again. And that is the beginning of freedom. So I am bringing these ideas here because I think they matter and they lead us to something real. A simpler mind, a gentler life, greater simplicity, a quiet kind of happiness that doesn't depend on getting everything right, on achieving, on building, on getting things done. And you can use these steps to shift towards an alignment with life instead of a conflict towards it. Because when we have a lot of unnecessary passion, we tend to act and try and control. But life and reality don't care about our desire to control. Reality, as you can see at the bottom of the diagram, involves change, the truth of aging, the truth of sickness, the truth of death, the truth that we are driven by and subject to this body and this mind that we inhabit. And those are the reality, that's the reality and the facts of our lives. And that's how reality always gets its way. And so in order to align with reality, we have to accept it as it is. An unnecessary passion, doesn't allow us to accept life as it is. So I'm hoping that this talk has helped you understand the model and your mind a little better, and if it has, I'm glad. And that's the goal here, to develop more clarity about steps that we can take to move forward. And if you want to explore the practical Buddhist coaching course, have a look at the links that I've provided. If you want more structured guidance, you can move stage by stage through 1, 2, 3, 4. And otherwise, you can subscribe and like and watch more videos like this.